Russia asks other countries to return weapons sold to them. WSJ. Ukrainska Pravda. Russia is trying to get back some of the weapons it exported to countries such as Pakistan, Egypt, Belarus and Brazil. Source: The Wall Street Journal with reference to sources' details. 3 sources told the WSJ that last April, a delegation of Russian officials who visited Cairo asked the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to return more than 100 engines from Russian helicopters that Moscow needed for its war against Ukraine. Below are your comments. I'm sure they'd be happy to sell them back for payment in dollars or gold on a cash-up front basis. Pricing would of course need to have holding, inventory and transport charges added as well as the handling charges. I have no idea what the export tax is if Russia wants them shipped there, of course. If Egypt is willing to sell back Russian implements of war, to be used for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I think the US should stop any and all aid we give Egypt, or any other country providing implements of war to Russia. I am sure the US sends Egypt a lot of money and aid annually. These countries that bought weapons from Russia and now are asked to return them might want to think why these great Russian weapons are being destroyed so fast on the battlefield. Not a great investment after all, was it? I can hear it now. Well, we aren't actually going to pay you for returning those weapons you purchased, but if you don't return them, then there will be consequences. Next news. Haley to Ramaswamy during heated GOP debate exchange, "You're just scum." Yahoo News. In a particularly heated moment at Wednesday's Republican presidential debate, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley responded angrily to an attack by businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, calling him scum for bringing up her family. Below are your comments. Were the candidates responding as though they were in primary school still? People, the world is no place for name-calling and labeling, but is a place in need of true statesmanship and personal control of the unruly tongue. Show us someone who knows how to make friends, win people, exchange ideas. Well, she's right about that, but also said she would cut off trade with China. If she did that, inflation would skyrocket to new heights and items would be rationed, if not by the government, then by price. It's scary that Chris Christie was the most reasonable person on stage, maybe in the room. I'm confused by the comments. Haley literally chastised Vivek for trying to reach out to people by using the social media app TikTok. Okay. She did so because she thinks the app is a form of psychological warfare being used by China against our culture. So Vivek replied, "How can you tell me that I shoal?" I find her comments disturbing. She's way too angry for my taste, but this is where we are as a nation. Anything goes, no decorum. These are some very sad people on that stage. Next news. U.S. military strikes facility in Syria in response to attacks on troops. The Hill. U.S. Forces struck a weapons storage facility Wednesday in eastern Syria used by Iran and its proxies after continued attacks against American troops in the region, according to the Pentagon. President Biden directed the self-defense strike on the facility, used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) and affiliated groups, using two U.S. F-15s. Defense. Below are your comments. Honestly, anything within 10 miles of the bases should be cleared, especially from our airbases. No reason this cannot be swift and decisive. No time for cat and mouse games to test our defenses. They throw a $1,000 drone, we retaliate with $1 million missile. Keep it. That's a joke and reminds me of Vietnam, where we went after useless targets over and over. Take off the gloves. Pentagon looked high and low for a facility to bomb that was empty and unmanned, so that they could report how tough they were and resolute in their determination to blunt terror threats to U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. Good job, guys. Why not take out the leaders of these forces, as Trump did? Wasn't it media who said Trump would bring us to war? Remember this next November. If we didn't have troops there, we would not have to start another war defending them. What other Western countries or NATO members have troops in Syria? Next news. Paul, Rubio lock horns with Biden officials over Ukraine support. The Hill. GOP sends Rand Paul, KY, and Marco Rubio, Florida, locked horns with Biden administration officials during a Wednesday morning Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing on emergency funding for Ukraine. The two Republican senators were the only members of the panel who openly opposed support for President Biden's $105 billion supplemental appropriations request, which contains $60. Below are your comments. Paul and Rubio are Putin supporters as much of the GOP. I don't how he owns them and others, but there should be investigations. Isolationism is extremely short-sighted. Paul is not helping anyone with the agenda. Helping Ukraine is helping freedom in Europe, and we are still in the Cold War even if people want to ignore that reality. This from the guy who fights with his own neighbors. I'll pass on anything Paul has to say. Why do Republicans support Putin? That should be the first question asked on the debate stage and at every press event. And continue asking until there is an answer. What exactly is the deal with Ukraine, and why is it our concern other than the Bidens having business dealings in Ukraine? And what is with dropping the sanctions on Iran, engulfing the Middle East in flames of Islamic terrorism once again to enrich Iran so they can sell tons of oil cheaply to Kai? Next news. Nations expanding fossil fuel production despite climate pledges, report. The Hill. Several countries are expanding fossil fuel production despite pledges to have net zero emissions, according to a new report from a United Nations environmental agency. Contrary to 151 national governments pledging net zero emissions from fossil fuel production activity, i.e., the 2023 Production Gap Report, published Wednesday by the UN Environment Programme, found governments around the world will. Below are your comments. The only ones on schedule to hit net zero are all the investors in the green projects. The Green Party was started by Marxists in Germany in the early 1980s. Here are some climate change facts. Earth has been warmer in the past and sea level has been higher, as proven by the existence of coral islands and atolls around the world. Coral only grows underwater. Earth's glacial cycles renounce the SDGs, ESG and UN Agenda 2030. Luckily, this radical environmentalist extremist saved planet from global warming. We live in a 5-bedroom doctor's house with a 4-stall garage, have SUVs and pickups are parked. It has an office, gym, theater room, with a 100-in projection TV, bar room and 2-story living room, a gas fireplace. This is because we need reasonably priced fuel and electricity and want to empty our stomachs on climate pledges. Next news. U.S. carries out airstrikes in eastern Syria targeting IRGC and Iranian-backed groups' weapons storage facility. CNN. 2 U.S. F-15 fighter jets conducted an airstrike on a weapons storage facility in eastern Syria used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and affiliated groups, the Pentagon announced Wednesday. Below are your comments. The president has no higher priority than the safety of U.S. personnel, and he directed today's action to make clear that the United States will defend itself, its personnel, and its interests. What a crock! Where was this when he abandoned Afghanistan and left behind millions in weapons that can? I knew when I read this we hit another empty warehouse. This is ridiculous. Our bases have been hit well over 30 times. We have serious injuries. Either let our soldiers strike back or send them home. They are not propaganda to be sitting ducks for a fake presence of action. No wars during the time of Trump, remember? Trump even bleep an Iranian terror general. Now terrorists and dictators don't respect America. America is involved in too many wars right now far from our borders, and we are spending billions, but we are not even protecting our own borders. Stolen elect. Stop playing patty cake. Take Iran out of the equation and see who wants to play ball then. Next news. Hezbollah's anti-ship missiles bolster its threat to U.S. Navy. Reuters. Powerful Russian anti-ship missiles acquired by Hezbollah give it the means to deliver on its leader's veiled threat against U.S. warships and underline the grave risks of any regional war, sources familiar with the group's arsenal say. Hezbollah leader Sayed Hassan Nasrallah warned Washington last week his group had something in store for the U.S. vessels deployed to the region since war erupted last month between the Palestinian group Hamas and Israel, shaking the wider Middle East. To sue. Below are your comments. To the enemies of America that wish to do our military or civilians harm. Just try it. We react slowly and cautiously, but we do react, and we act proportionately and effectively with the best military in the world. To say this would be the most colossal of all colossal mistakes is a colossal understatement. Good luck, and I'll have fries with that. If Hezbollah was ever crazy enough to sink a U.S. ship, which they could probably not do, the response would make Israel's response to 10/7 look like a walk in the park. What good is sinking one ship, when the result would be the U.S. turning their entire country into a deep crater? Is Biden waiting until an American is bleeped by Hezbollah's rockets? Next news. Kyiv presents Budapest with plan to stop Hungarian minority dispute blocking Ukraine's EU bid. The EU Voice of Ukraine. Ukraine has provided Hungary with a detailed roadmap on how to resolve disputes over minority issues. Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration Olha Stefanishina said on Ukraine and national television on November. Below are your comments. One of the main reasons of the war was the mistreatment of Russian-speaking Ukrainian citizen in Don. This Hungarian enclave in Ukraine who happen to speak Hungarian are Ukrainian citizens. Are Ukraine to start treating their minorities right, is they don't. No EU, NATO for you. And I want to draw attention to the fact that the European Commission in its report confirmed Ukraine's progress, confirmed that the rights of national minorities meet the Copenhagen criteria set for EU member states, the Deputy PM said. Something on a piece of paper does not mean it is true. If you want to understand the problem, check the border map of Europe through the years. It is amazing. Good luck, but with Orban on his knees for Putin all the time, I'd say it's unlikely to happen. Next news. U.S. launches airstrike on Syria site linked to Iranian-backed militants. Military Times. This is the second time in less than 2 weeks that the U.S. has bombed facilities linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Below are your comments. No wars during the time of Trump, remember? Trump even bleep an Iranian terror general. Now terrorists and dictators don't respect America. America is involved in too many wars right now far from our borders, and we are spending billions, but we are not even protecting our own borders. Stolen electee. The president has no higher priority than the safety of U.S. personnel, and he directed today's action to make clear that the United States will defend itself, its personnel, and its interests, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said in a statement. Really, Secretary Austin? The president has no Now merely on this issue when comes to evil regime in Iran's proxies, I encourage US to hit and hit hard. First of all because they are not supposed to be there. Second, it's a military installation, no civilians. Third, they can't attack US institutions with impunity. But ultimately, we must topple the re. Next news. British nationals and dependents stopped from leaving Gaza with families. BBC. Two men say Egypt sent them back to a war zone after they waited for days at the Rafah crossing. Below are your comments. Sounds like the Brits don't want him back. If he's a citizen and has done something criminal, they should take him back and prosecute him. My question is, why are they leaving a British citizen in a war zone? They fled the Shijaya area east of Gaza City on the 13th of October, after the Israeli military told the 1.1 million people in the north to flee southwards for their own safety. He and his family should have gotten out of Gaza on the 8th of October. I doubt that he had no idea what was going on. It's amazing how people no longer think they have any personal accountability for their own decisions. Imagine the reverse. What would this guy have said a month ago if the UK would have refused him permission to travel to Gaza? The foot sniffer. Whichever one of his wives and their alleged spawn are not now, have never have been and will never be British. Next news. Brazilian authorities foil Hezbollah terror plot to attack Jews in its country, Israel says. Fox News. Brazil has arrested two people suspected of being part of a Hezbollah terror plot to attack Jews in the South American country, authorities said Wednesday. Below are your comments. Like I've been saying, it's only a matter of time before they set it off here in the States. After seeing pics of their protests in large numbers and in multiple cities, how come we not be war? IED and stay naive. I didn't know there were that many here like this, seriously. What foolishness has th? With Hezbollah and Hamas it is hatred of the Jews over land. With the rest of the world, it is anti-Semitism. Different reasons for the hatred but, same result. I cannot in good conscience condemn Israel for the right to exist. I don't understand the sudden anti-Semitic feelings throughout the world. Results of courting with Iranian regime. Brazil must expel Iranian terrorist diplomats. Terrorists needs to be destroyed. I guess voting with Hamas, Hezbollah did not end well with Brazil. Next news. Haley, Xi, Putin, salivating at thought of Ramaswamy becoming president. The Hill. Foreign leaders such as Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping are salivating at the idea that Vivek Ramaswamy could be president, fellow GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley said during Wednesday's debate. I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. The Below are your comments. Hearing Martha Stewart's opinion on the quality and taste of Nikki's cookies would be quite intriguing. I agree with Nimrata. Putin is salivating, but not for Ramsdoublewhammy. Nimrata knows the salivation is for Trump and his mouthpiece in Tucker Carlson. MAGA cult and Fox glorifies Putin non-stop. Shameful. They are salivating more for Trump to be president. But I'm sure they'd happily settle for Ramaswamy. None of these cow-pee-drunk muggets will be elected. Sorry, hot pants. Xi and Putin don't even know this guy. They want someone totally controllable. And his name is Fat Donnie. Next news. U.S. spent 96% of allocated funds for supporting Ukraine, White House. The new voice of Ukraine. The United States has spent 96% of the funds earmarked for military aid to Ukraine in its war against Russian aggression, White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said on November. Below are your comments. Well, let's be smart for once and keep the remaining 4%. Anything above 90% cuts into Biden's 10%. The U.S. is the only nation in the world refusing to defend its own border while sending troops, aircraft carriers, weapons, billions of dollars to defend borders of other nations. Well, normally it's used to bail out poorly ran blue states, just like where a lot of the pandemic money went. It'd be interesting to know how much money that 96% amounted to. Better take the credit card away from the government. Just think, if you put all the monies for Ukraine and illegals on the border, how much could have been done for the veterans and children of the U.S. Funny, the government can find all this money for these programs but cannot find money to shore up. Next news. Russian missile strikes Liberian flagged cargo ship near Odessa, Ukraine says. The new voice of Ukraine. The Russian military has launched a missile at a civilian cargo ship sailing under the Liberian flag, approaching the port of Odessa, a pilot on board and injuring 3 crew members, Ukraine's Operational Command South said in a Telegram post on November. Below are your comments. I get it, Russia has to block Ukraine from earning any currency. What if the EU built a port at Musura Bay, Romania, adjacent to Ukraine, along with railroad connection? All Ukraine grain would be stored there. And we sent a convoy of clearly marked U.S.-flagged cargo ships. If that happens enough, won't be good for the Russian side of the war. Wow, that was stupid of Russia. Hitting a vessel that was taking iron to China that they could have bought to make more tanks with. Just saying. On top of that, they attacked another sovereign nation, Liberia, and citizens of the Philippines, an American ally. Putin's just making friends, Al. Next news. Israel says these photos show Hamas rockets in and near UN facilities in Gaza. CBS News. Israel has accused Hamas militants in Gaza of committing double war crimes by not only firing rockets at civilians, but firing them from and near United Nations-run facilities. Below are your comments about Hamas using UNRWA facilities. Realize that the majority of its workers are local people. Even the UN, who are so blatantly biased against Israel, report that Hamas uses civilians as human shields and hoards resources intended for civilians. Wake up world, this is a just war against Islamic fundamentalism. UN officials told CBS News on Wednesday that 99 members of their staff have been bleep in Gaza since Palestinian enclaves Hamas rulers triggered the current war with their brutal 10/7 terror attack. October 7 terror attack. UNRWA, the UN's Palestinian Refugee Relief Agency, says it has more planted evidence to justify IDF targeting of UN-designated schools. Free the Palestinian people. We see what you are doing. Next news. U.S. used up 96% of funds approved by Congress for Ukraine aid, White House. Ukrainska Pravda. John Kirby, Strategic Communications Coordinator for the White House National Security Council, said, "The United States used up almost all of the funds approved by Congress to help Ukraine." Source. Kirby said this at a briefing on Wednesday, 8 November, reports European Pravda with reference to Voice of America. Quote, "Of the total funds that have been provided to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, which is an excess of $60 billion United States dollars, and that's not just security assistance. That's economic." Below are your comments. Let's do the right thing for the American people and keep the remaining 4%. Oops, money all gone. Time for America to spend money on securing its own border now. Print. Joey thinks money grows on trees. We've sent enough money, now stop the cash flow. Fix the things here. No money for Ukraine, spend money on the homeless and vet. The minute we stop giving them money they get run over, so what's the point? Next news. Republicans pivot to bombing Iran in third debate. Reason.com. Tim Scott. You actually have to cut off the head of the snake, and the head of the snake is Iran and not simply their proxies. Below are your comments. Nobody is qualified to be president. They all say that to be noticed by the media. History shows us that over and over again. No Republican and no Biden neither. Not my vote in 2024. That's going to go a long way to decreasing the national debt. Party of fiscal responsibility, huh? That's what losers do when it becomes clear to them that they are losers. The debate was horrible. None of them deserve to be president, but just the fact that they are even on the stage shows how low we have fallen. My foreign policy is simple. No, Scott, it's a simpleton's foreign policy. You sound a lot like Netanyahu, who has been trying to nudge the U.S. into a war with Iran for decades. Iran may support these terrorist groups, just like we support Israel, until it actually attacks us directly. We have. Next news. Zelensky, Ukraine still capable of battlefield achievements despite frustration. Kyiv Independent. President Volodymyr Zelensky reassured audiences at the Reuters Next conference in New York on November 8 that Ukraine is still on track to deliver military results by the end of the year. Below are your comments. The more money you steal from the West, the more pain and suffering Ukraine will endure. The end result will be the same, just prolonged. The man who cancelled elections keeps sending his countrymen to their death. What an achievement. Ukraine is still on track to deliver military results by the end of the year. Really? The nearly $200 billion in military aid that Ukraine has received so far hasn't been enough to produce military results? No amount of military aid will be enough to beat Russia. This is a non-winnable war foe. My man, fight till last Ukrainian. This is what I paid for out of my taxpayers' money bag. Despite how much he can get, the result will be same. Next news. Support for Israel and verbal sparring propel fiery third Republican debate. The Guardian. Candidates clash over Ukraine and immigration and grapple with abortion questions as Donald Trump holds LDS rally nearby. Below are your comments. I would love DeSantis or Haley to be the VP selection for Trump. The Supreme Court will eventually hear the Trump illegitimate trial and about the fraud. No one believes the NYAG, he is just making a political statement which should never be tolerated by America. Isn't law supposed to be appellee? I think this ought to be called the VP debate. The presidential candidate is locked. These GOP debates are a waste of time. The party is stuck with the fat orange creature who will likely be in jail on election day. This is the GOP of 2024. They will be running a convicted prisoner for POTUS. How dispiriting. Gearing up for second place. Looser. Next news. EU ambassador to Ukraine. Even Putin can't stop Ukraine's accession. Kyiv Independent. Ukraine is now one step closer to its strategic goal of becoming a member of the European Union. On November 8, the European Commission published its annual enlargement report. In it, the Commission confirmed that Ukraine had completed enough of the steps laid out in 7 recommendations it received from the EU last year. Below are your comments. Nobody can make statements overriding the democratic process. ruling the EU membership. Putin has already stopped Ukraine. Anyone in EU want to fight with Russian army in Ukraine? Putin can by occupying Ukraine territory. Putin has never objected to the Ukraine becoming an EU member prior to the start of the SMO. But now that the EU is fully joined at the hip with NATO, it will not be allowed, nor tolerated. You can smell the EU and NATO's desperation now. Viva Vlad the Bold. CADS. KVN. Next news. Ukrainian membership would threaten EU security, Hungary says. The new voice of Ukraine. Ukraine joining the EU would bring war into the European Union, Hungary's Foreign Minister Péter S. Szijjártó said on November 8, as reported by Hungarian outlet Portfolio. Below are your comments. Péter Szijjártó may confuse EU with NATO. EU is not a security alliance. Ukraine can join EU, but may not NATO even during the war with Russia. Is Hungary fulfilling all the conditions set for EU membership now? If so, why does EU withhold some fund for Hungary? I think Hungary may have some hidden Ukraine joining threatens EU? EU is already threatened by Russia's acts of violence against a helpless Ukraine. These Hungarian leaders should be ashamed of themselves by hiding reality from Europeans. Oh, he meant that his own policies toward the EU and NATO are visibly dangerous as they are more ally. GNED with Putin's plans. Next news. Ukraine runs out of volunteers to mobilize, journalist says. The new voice of Ukraine. Ukraine will no longer see large swaths of individuals willing to mobilize voluntarily, as those keen on joining the military have already done so in 2022, Yuri Butusov, editor-in-chief at Censor.net, said in an interview with NV Radio on November 6. Below are your comments. No one is calling this little conflict the Third World War. Why, you ask? 90% of the world does not care in the least what happens to Russia or the Ukraine. And this is why dictator Zelensky made it illegal for men to leave the country, time to force them all to fight in Zelensky and Putin's war. I was not aware that Ukraine was not conscripting. I am a Vietnam-era veteran. I know what war brings to the support of conscription. I know Ukraine is fighting for its existence and the draft is unpopular, but what option exists? Go Ukraine. Next news. We're having huge success on Crimean front, National Security and Defense Council Secretary. Ukraine. NSKA Pravda. Alexei Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, NSDC, has said that Ukraine is achieving huge success on the Crimean front. Source. Danilov on the joint national 24/7 newscast, quoted by Ukrinform quote, "We are having huge success on the Crimean front right now." Below are your comments. Huge success on Crimean front means that Ukraine is still alive. Well, they sure ain't having any successes on any other front. Sure, Bidenomics is a huge success according to Biden. Why don't we measure this success at the U.S. gas stations? So, let's ask everyday Ukrainian folks about this success. But not the ones who had the means to escape and live a nice life in Western EU countries right now. Possible utilizing some more propaganda. Next news. Scott says he believes we have sleeper terrorist cells in America. The Hill. Tim Scott, RSC, on Wednesday claimed there are sleeper terrorist cells in America, as he called for greater national security measures on the southern border. I believe that we have sleeper terrorist cells in America. Thousands of people have come from Yemen, Iran, Syria and Iraq, Scott said on the debate stage. Below are your comments. Okay, aside from saying we should do something, exactly what does he propose? What legislation would he offer? And since he is a senator, where has he been? I don't recall him sponsoring a comprehensive immigration reform bill. Proud Boys and Boogaloo to name a few. They're called Republicans. No kidding, Timmy. They're called MAGA. He must be talking about MAGA followers. Next news. Zelensky says Ukraine will hold off elections during wartime. Deseret News. Airstrikes hit Ukrainian towns while counteroffensive stalls. President Zelensky says Ukraine's 2024 elections pushed back due to wartime. Below are your comments. One of the most corrupt regimes in the world today. The people have a right to choose their leaders even during time of war. Even the USA held elections in WW2. But we were here and not there in a war for survival. Maybe they should ask the people. Because they would oust him. South Vietnam held national elections even with constant fighting across the entire country. Iraq held national elections during an insurgency. Nothing but a little dictator who is afraid to lose power or that the people will rightfully vote for peace. Oops, we supported another false democracy. Next news. Israel latest. U.S. carries out self-defense strike in Syria. Bloomberg. U.S. fighters fired upon a weapons depot in Syria used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said, adding that the self-defense strike was in retaliation for a tax on American forces in Iraq and Syria. Most read from Bloomberg. Rockstar plans to announce much-anticipated Grand Theft Auto vs 30-year mortgage rate tumbles by most in more than a year. VIX notches its longest slide since October 2015. Arcit's rap Adam Newman remains a billionaire. Below are your comments. There is no such person as a Holocaust survivor. Because the 1939 Jewish Encyclopedia lists the total Jewish population of all Europe as 6 million. Not just Jews living in Germany. Next news. Vivek Ramaswamy calls Nikki Haley, bleep, Cheney in 3-inch heelses during debate. HuffPost. There for ammunition, the former United Nations ambassador fired back. Below are your comments. Vivek is Donald Trump 40 years younger. Trump got the 2016 nomination being disruptive and trying to get laughs rather than being serious. ND Vivek is following the same game plan. Since Trump came into the political world, the requirements of having class is no more. It's ironic that even Cheney is now the subject of ridicule for Republicans, whereas in the past the Y had nothing but praise for him. Even he is not crazy and extremist enough for today's Republicans. I wonder if the cult truly enjoys these so-called political debates? Ramaswamy certainly does not have my vote. Next news. Iran-backed Yemeni rebels bleep down U.S. drone. BBC. Washington is on alert for activity by Iran-backed groups in the region in the wake of the Israel-Gaza war. Below are your comments. Bleeping down a drone is no simple task. Turns out, someone is arming this rebel group with some high-grade stuff. Stuff that isn't needed for their rebellion inside Yemen. This is what happens when you enable a terror-supporting country to take charge over another society. Outside of the how this. Time for the U. Navy to engage in target practice. Then it's time to exterminate all their stockpiles, start intel gathering. Use superior spy gadgets in cooperation of Saudis and others soonest. I guess, do something about rendering some kind services to its supplier. Next news. U.S. Transportation Secretary meets with Zelensky in Kyiv. The new voice of Ukraine. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg arrived in Kyiv on an unannounced visit on November 8. U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Bridget Brink reported on X, the social medium formerly known as Twitter. Below are your comments. The Ukraine is not the U.S. Why is this U.S. citizen-paid transportation secretary not working for the people who pay his salary? How he can afford to go there if his salary was cut to $1. Pete Buttplug has no say or ability to work with foreign nations whatsoever, so just why are U.S. tax dollars being used to send him the Ukraine? U.S. should work on their own transportation issues first. Did Pete ever make it to Palestine, Ohio? Next news. Ramaswamy appears to call Zelensky a Nazi at GOP debate. The Hill. Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy appeared to call Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a Nazi during the GOP debate Wednesday, with his campaign later seeking to clarify his remarks. During a sweeping critique of the Ukrainian government, the entrepreneur and vocal Ukraine critic Tked off a number of ways in which he argued that Kyiv was. Below are your comments. Yes, there really are some Republican politicians who support the Russians. We need to modify the constitution to allow Zelensky to run for president here. And to exclude Ramaswamy. How can anyone lend this clown any credence? Your master, Trump, is earning that moniker. Next news. Danilov. Ukraine making huge gains in occupied Crimea. Kyiv Independent. Ukraine has made huge gains as it destroys Russian military assets in occupied Crimea, according to National Security and Defense Council Secretary Oleksiy Danilov, Ukrinform reports. Below are your comments. Gains in Crimea is a joke. I guess you have to say that to keep foreign dollars flowing to your personal coffers. When the people of Ukraine find out your true self, you'll be in for trouble. Can a Russian territory be occupied by Russians? Of course it can. Crimea is more Russian than Israel is Jewish and New Mexico American. What an absolute clown. When Putin goes, Russia will vote Trump as the next leader. GL. Next news. Ukrainian foreign minister in Brussels urges ambassadors to continue supporting Ukraine. Ukrainska Pravda. During a visit to Brussels, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba addressed the participants of the Belgian Ambassadors Conference, urging them to continue supporting Ukraine amid Russia's full-scale invasion. Below are your comments. With that much of money we could just pay to Russia and get the Crimea back to Ukraine without sacrificing 10,000s of lives. Aren't you Ukrainians tired of tell others what to do and how to think? This is so embarrassing. TikTok Zelensky, time's almost up. Dead men walking. Fuck Ukraine. Next news. Iran backed how this bleep down US MQ-9 Reaper drone off coast of Yemen. Fox News. Iran backed how this militants shot down a US MQ-9 Reaper drone conducting surveillance off the coast of Yemen on Wednesday, according to a senior defense official. Below are your comments. More good news. DM. So that who this are well armed, huh? That means Iran and Russia are too. Under AJOE leadership, no one is respecting the US, not even the Houthi. How this are going to lose some toothies in this one. Drones doing what one of the things they are designed for, saving the lives of our pilots, in suck. A situation that could really cause a war. Next news. White House, 96% of Ukraine aid already spent. Kyiv Independent. The U.S. has already spent 96% of the funds allocated for Ukraine since the beginning of the war, White House spokesperson John Kirby told reporters on November. Below are your comments. No more aid. Not when we are $33 trillion in debt. While Republicans are busy helping Putin by refusing to get Ukraine more. Too bad, not one penny more. 50% of it has been stolen. Oh well, so sad. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you like it, please thumbs up.